Well, good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Fenton. Thank you, Crafts Council of Ireland. Thanks, Louise. It's my first time here and in the country of Ireland. I'd say the last 18 hours have been lovely, and especially to be in such a glorious setting. I'm an architect and a product designer by training, and I sort of will tell you the story of how that began and kind of how that ended with what I'm doing today. I'm sorry, the projector seems to have lost a bulb, but nevertheless, it's all pictures and videos. The class I teach at MIT is called Future Craft, and it was meant to be provocation. Really, I use craft as the driving force for innovation and for the kinds of innovation that I think are most important to be teaching and to be practicing today. And this is what my talk is about. This is a picture that has nothing to do with the future. It has everything to do with craft. For me, my first chance to go to India was this January, and I don't know what was more shocking. I'd never seen a place where people wear clothes that are different than the clothes that we all wear in every other country in the world and that I've been to. And that shouldn't have shocked me, but it shocked me that there was a place where people wear clothes that are different than the clothes that we all wear. We all know the value of craft, the livelihoods that it brings, the cultural self-representation, the empowerment. These are Indian clothes made by Indian people out of Indian cloth, dyed Indian colors, made out of Indian cotton. So there's a huge web of value in craft. And it's something that I guess is so rare that I hardly ever see it. And we know it when it's gone. This is a frame maker, corniciaio, in Florence. Florence is the city where my family's from, and I'm told that this was the trade that we practiced. This was our craft, frame making. I can't cry about the fate of Florentine craft because some of the crafts have really gone global, but you know it when you miss it. You know it when I finally found someone that could practice this craft and he could tell me about it, and also that he has no apprentice. Okay, I didn't see that coming. This is a picture I took when I was just about starting to design things. I was 18. You can tell it was taken with a real camera because it has the vignetting from the slide film. This is a picture of a shoe that I loved so very much that I took a picture of it when I was 18. This is the kind of thing that designers might do. And I bring it up because I just recently read a bestseller called Born to Run, written by Chris McDougall in the US. It's a book that argues that we were actually all made to run, and we've actually all been running for 500,000 years barefoot, and that we're actually quite good at it. And it's only in the last 25 years that we've started to get ankle and knee and hip pain and all sorts of problems, and we've actually started running much, much less. And he makes an argument that these over-designed, high-tech things that we strap to our feet are one of the reasons for all these injuries. Now, I love conspiracy theories because they really make you question everything all at once. It's like, oh, so I was running along the Charles River in Cambridge 2 days ago, and I was thinking, how could this be? My hip hurts. And how could this be that all the shoes I've ever worn were bad for my feet, that they were never made for me to run in the first place? And then I thought, well, how could it not be? I've never made a shoe. I've never known anybody who made a shoe. And when I make something, if I change it and I feel better the next day, well, I keep it that way. And if I change, I feel worse, I go back to the way it was before. Or even if I know the person who makes it, we can have a conversation about it. But I've never known any of the people who even conceived of these things or let alone made them. And yet, millions of us have worn them. And so I thought, well, this is really mind-blowing. I'm sure these are great shoes and a lot of thought went into it, and I love Nike. But if you lose the ability to make something, you lose the ability to have things made for you. You lose the ability to have the right product. That we're so disconnected between communities of people who make things and communities of people who consume things as a whole that we don't make the right things for ourselves. And now I don't know about the knee pain, but certainly we know that we outsource pollution to other countries because we don't live in the places where the things are made that we buy, so we don't see the impact that they have. We import materials vast distances rather than use local ones. So these are not the right products for our communities necessarily, the ones we're making. And I think that's at the root of many of the problems in fair trade and sustainability that we see today. But there's also a solution there, which is the solution of craft. Speaking of high-tech footwear, again, back to India. The two things that are the hottest trends in design right now: design for development, which means designing for the global south, designing for developing countries, designing for the 4 billion people who have less than $2 a day to live on, and sustainable design, which ostensibly is providing for future generations by designing more durable products with much less material in them. And these trends are quite powerful, and I think craft is actually the answer to how we think through these problems and solve them. So I'll talk about a few of the ways that people I appreciate, people I respect do this, and also my students who I also respect. If you go to a village, I think anywhere in the world, you'll just see people carrying water all day. And it's a pretty striking thing when you realize that it takes all day and the whole family to get enough water to your house. And that's where people, who have gone out and broached the divide between makers and users, between producers and consumers, have gone and devised ways to carry larger amounts of water farther. This is a project called the Hippo Water Roller. It was awarded a number of prizes. And it's great, right? Obviously, less trips per day means more time spent in school, etc. It's still probably made in China and was exported a great distance to wherever the people were fortunate enough to receive it. But it's a great step in the right direction. This is a still from a video from one of my students' projects, Heather Brundage and Brooke Jarrett, that's right. And it was a way to reuse trash to make clean water that was already at the sites where people needed it. So this is actually the wrapper for a bottle of soda, Coca-Cola bottle, the plastic ones. They get thrown out in developing countries just like they do in developed ones. And just by printing instructions on the inside, they found a way that you could build a particulate water filter and a UV water filter out of the remains. So using the trash is now one of the most high-value raw materials to be found locally all over the world. It was a good year to make cotton in India because it was a really bad year to make cotton in Pakistan. So even the cotton that was conventionally grown, but especially fair trade cotton, was extremely valuable. And this is not uncommon. On the trip I went on, I traced the entire chain of fair trade cotton from farm to store. It's an amazing country because you'll have essentially within a few hours the richest people in the world and the poorest people in the world. This is a son and a mother stockpiling their cotton. That's their year's worth of cotton. It's behind them. It's about $200 worth. And they're waiting because the price is pretty good this year. They think they can get a little bit more out of it. It always puts things in perspective to see that pile of cotton. This is the association that I went to visit, really, to learn from, which is called Chetna Organic. It teaches organic farming methods. And it's important to note fair trade is not about ethical principles. Fair trade is really just about empowering people to live. Now, there have been about 200,000 farmer suicides in India in the last 10 years, mostly due to the inability to pay back loans for fertilizer, for seed, for pesticide. And so when organic farming practices are brought, people have predictable costs of their inputs. They make their own fertilizers and pesticides and seeds. So year to year, their only fluctuation is how much they can sell the cotton for, but at least they don't have to pay a very high price for the inputs that go into the cotton. This is a place where they train the farmers to grow a kind of fertilizer called vermiculture made with worms, and they use the pottery made regionally to create these sort of bioreactors where the worms make all this wonderful stuff, and they end up with that plastic bottle of goodness, and that's one of the reasons that the farmers have a much more stable income. Design for development is sometimes not glorious. It's certainly not as flashy as the sneakers I showed, but it can make a big difference. This is an example of a woman named Amy Smith at MIT who essentially coined the term design for development. This is a design for a charcoal making machine that is now in use throughout Africa, but also in Haiti. It can use agricultural byproducts to make charcoal. And very simple, very unpretentious. But this is the new kind of design. This is what I try to get students to be interested in. And this is what I hope one day will become cool. The ability to make products that are completely renewable is a huge, huge struggle that we're having. It doesn't mean that you don't use the latest technologies or you don't make them really cool. These are laser cut felt and cork sandals from one of my students, Ella Pejnovic. It just takes that extra spark of imagination to make these things desirable. Another example, a project I really love, the Magno wooden radio, it really is a combination of sustainable design and design for development. Yes, it's a wooden radio. And what's a radio anyways? I don't know. But what comes with the radio is a village of people who use their local wood and their local craft to make the object. So it's a much more durable, much more valuable object, and it was thought of not just because of the way it looks cool, but because of the kinds of livelihoods that it supports. Okay, moving on to my world. This is the sort of the high-tech spectrum of design for development, the $100 laptop, which also came out of MIT, of the Media Lab, where I just graduated from. And it was a laptop designed for bringing digital technology to the 4 billion other people in the world. And a lot of innovation came out of it. You'd say a $100 laptop, well, this was designed 5 years ago. So, it was cheap. So you thought, okay, it will have less features, it would be really terrible. But no, they had to design it so that the screen could be read in the sun. They had to design it so that the battery would last for 2 days. They had to design it so that it could be repaired on site. Actually, my favorite, they actually added extra screws so that if you lost a screw, you could replace it yourself. And if you had one extra laptop out of 20, then all 20 would last 1 more year. Now, this kind of stuff, the rule of thumb, by the way, for sustainable design is all we have to do is reduce by 80% everything. So if you make products with half as much stuff and they last twice as long, you're pretty much there. That's not hard. Another approach that I really enjoy is, I would have never come up with, Julian Wong, another student of mine, was why do we make products so crappy? Why do we, because sometimes the tasks themselves, we don't even value the tasks. We don't even value what we're doing with them. A mop, a toilet brush. So this was a garden rake that he designed to look like a ginkgo biloba leaf. But his idea was that you wouldn't throw the rake away because it was pretty. And not only that, because when you were raking, you were actually doing something artistic now. So it was no longer a disposable act, nor was it a disposable product. I really like that way of thinking. Okay, back to technology. This is actually the new director of the Media Lab. One of his side projects is this iGeigy, which is an iPod dock that measures radiation. It was deployed after the earthquake in Japan, and it allows for the kinds of idea sharing that I think should replace the kinds of materials shipment that we have. We don't need to ship materials so far when we can share ideas so far. This is crowdsourcing at its best, and crowdsourcing, for anybody who doesn't use the term every day, like me, means taking the ideas of as many people as possible and combining them into an intellectual work that's much greater than anybody could do on their own, ever. So Wikipedia is the best example. This is how the best results of radiation measurements in Japan are being obtained right now. Now, there's a problem with the world of craft today and the world of mass production. The mass-produced stuff is cool. It's made out of great materials. It's many times engineered better. You could never make your own computer chips, much as people have tried. And at the same time, we're in a place where we realize that we should be making things locally, that we probably will destroy the earth if we don't. So I really like projects where have shown that we can share ideas but not strip the world of livelihoods. This is a project called the Open Prosthetics Project, which uses a pool of people distributed around the world who are tinkering, hacking, making prosthetics. There's not enough of them in any one city or country even to get together, but on the web there's enough of them. It's what I call a virtual guild, a group of people that is able to share know-how, problems that need to be solved, solutions with each other, and create a kind of a guild just like they used to be, except these guilds don't have to protect. They actually thrive from open source information, from Creative Commons and from the ability to distribute information. Another project in a very similar vein is if you really think through it, sometimes the best way to get the right products out there is to give away the plans. And this is a case of a wheelchair called the Whirlwind wheelchair, which was conceived like the radio I showed you, with a means for livelihood, as well as a product that was superior to any other. It's actually a wheelchair designed for places where there are no wheelchair ramps, which is, again, probably 90% of the world. And it was designed so that it could be made by people who are themselves in wheelchairs, and it was designed along with instructions for how to make the workshop that the wheelchair would be made in. So it provides a livelihood, it provides a solution, it provides a short-term answer to a problem that's going to take a very long time to fix institutionally. It's also pretty amazing. Right. So all of this stuff comes down to, I'm supposed to talk about technology, it all comes down to something that was written about by Chris Anderson in 2004 called the long tail. And it basically says that there's great hope for craft with digital technology because there is no reason anymore to have blockbuster products. There's just as much money to be made in 1 million different unique products as there is in one product that sells 1 million copies. And the problem in the past was that you had to concentrate all this stuff into a store, and the store could only hold so much on its shelves. But that's not the case anymore. So you can have unique prosthetic devices being designed and made in small batches. In this case, what the graph shows, the reason it's called the long tail is that, yeah, sure, the top, Hollywood movies will sell quite a few. But then now if you go on any of these websites like Amazon or Netflix, I don't know if you have Netflix here yet, but you will. It allows you to find all this obscure content, all these incredibly different things that you would have never thought of, never found in the past. And if you add up all of the sales of all of the obscure titles, the niche products, they add up to just as much, if not more, than the sales of the most popular things. So this is great hope for crafts, for virtual guilds, because it means that there is a customer out there for your product, and there's a supplier of the rare materials and the rare parts that you might need to make your product. So there's a sort of a natural pairing that's coming up through sharing of ideas on the web. It really comes down to, however, the information being open and being available so that people can make communities around it. The classic example for craft for the long tail is Etsy, which has actually raised, I think $100 million in funding now. It's a completely crowdsourced site where basically it's an Amazon for craft, and I don't know how many of you use it, but certainly in the States it's grown and grown and grown, and probably it'll fold into one of the larger e-retailers one of these days soon. It allows you to browse for products based on who made them, where they're made, all of those criteria that have nothing to do with form and function, but in fact add to it. This is for me the biggest enigma in production today. This is a milling machine, a 3D printer as they're called. It's actually from a company in Florida called Ponoco that makes shoes that are based on 3D scans of your feet. It's something that a human could do, but a machine can probably do slightly cheaper. This is both the greatest promise and the greatest threat to craft. When I was trained as an architect or product designer, we were actually trained to use these kinds of machines. So we design something, and then hit print, and then it would print out. I was like, oh, cool. But that's the same exact thing that we do to get things manufactured in China. We've never even held a prototype in our hands. That's why when an iPhone comes out, there's already 10 iPhone cases for it, because somebody designed it and sent it to China and it was printed. That's the divorce. That's the sort of dislocation of producers and consumers that I think exacerbates social and environmental problems. At the same time, if you think about it the opposite way, if you can have the ideas of many, many people all over the world coming to you, and then you get to produce that custom object with your own 3D printer at your site, and it has the best ideas in the world, but it uses the right materials and it is made in the right way for your community, that's a great power. So I'm really not sure about 3D printing, but those are at least the two ways I feel about it. So this is where we live. This is the reality we live in. Every single object has been touched by thousands of hands, if not hundreds of thousands. Everything is linked. This is actually leading into what I'll talk to you about, which is my work right now, which is Source Map. This is actually the supply chain for an airplane. but it looks just like the supply chain for a cup of noodles or a T-shirt or a computer. This is a Boeing, actually. It does look different from the Airbus supply chain. This is where I come from. This is a real maker's place. It's a craft place called the Media Lab. It's always like this. No, this was under construction a year and a half ago in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I urge anybody who likes to see makers to visit this place. It looks like the Museum of Modern Art. It's actually a lab full of crazy tinkerers that are combining technology and product design and biology and prosthetics and every single kind of making that you could do under one roof. And it really messes with your mind to spend as much time there as I have. But it's a wonderful place. It opens you to completely new opportunities. And it's called the Media Lab because ultimately it's about creating new mediums. So consuming media means you're already accepting the outcomes that have been decided by the makers, but creating your own media means that you can create the way people think and the way people trade. And that's exactly what SourceMap came out of, this kind of context. I was just starting to teach, and I wanted to teach sustainable design 5 years ago, and I came across the fact that there was no way for the students to know the impact of a product. These are students at MIT, they're master's or PhD students, and there was no tool or no information for them to decide whether to make product A or product B out of one material or another, in one country or another. Isn't that crazy? If the people that are coming out of MIT don't know that, what hope is there, right? We don't even have the information. Anyways, so I started with this project, which was very simple. It was I would take my laptop, I would dissect it, I would find out exactly where everything came from, and then I would etch it with a laser on the back. So I always remember that the black box that I have in my hand every day is actually a box of treasures. It's actually a box that contains 50 materials that come from at least 25 countries. It contains the rarest materials in the world. Some of them we only have a few thousand tons of. It contains the most plentiful materials in the world. It took tons and tons of waste to make. The materials will never be recuperated. And it's like the best and the worst thing humanity has ever done. I was really impressed because if you think about all the people that are involved in making, I mean, this is also in your cell phone. If you think of all the people that are involved in making that little thing in your pocket, it might connect every single human being on Earth, just about. Everybody who's mining and manufacturing, shaping, shipping, using, if we all have one, right? So we're all in this supply chain together. So it's the biggest social network ever. On the other hand, there's a lot of problems there, and I think we know about many of them. Oh, and also, this is funny. I saw this at a museum in Florida. Actually, it's actually the same map. It's not by coincidence. I think the old posters urging people to buy from the English Empire, South Africa, Canada, Australia, China, India. It hasn't changed very much. We still use the same trade routes, actually. We just zoom in on any point on that map, and you find out something amazing. This is the island called Tin Island, where 60% of the world's tin comes from. So if your laptop has 100 grams of tin in it, like mine, 60 grams come from that island. That's amazing. One island. What's more amazing is that it's not legal to mine tin on Tin Island. That it's been mined artisanally by the descendants of the slaves that were imported from China 250 years ago to start mining tin there. And that it's actually completely devastated as a result of tin mining. But there you have it. That's just one of the points. So, with this in mind, I sat down with a bunch of brilliant programmers, and we decided, let's just make this possible for any product, anywhere in the world, and let's make the tool available for anybody to use whenever. And you see, it breaks down a product into where every part comes from, how much of every material there is, where it came from, what's the carbon footprint of making it, what's the carbon footprint of shipping it, what's the carbon footprint of using it, throwing it away. Breaks it all down very matter of fact, because actually it's just accounting. It's just accounting that people don't do. And I thought, well, at least we should get started with the students. They should care. You can even figure things out, like I talked about, things need to be right for you. It'll even tell you if you want a product shipped to you, what does that do? What does the last leg of the product's manufacturing do? And this is just to show off how cool it is, but it's open source, right? We take advantage of all of the linked data on the internet, which means you can zoom in to all of the mines where all of the metals come from, of all the materials in the products that you own. They're actually not hard to find. They're so big. Look at that highway compared to that mine. So this is a demo, right? This was to say, look at how powerful our technology is. Let me stop that loop. And it was going to be for students, which was a great thing. Students would know, they would learn, they'd be conscious, and at least they would be more connected to the producers of things. And the way that we released it, though, was just a matter of factly, we just put it out there, wait to see if it broke. And if people go in there, anybody, you can go there right now and put in a supply chain of a product, because there's so few out there. There's only about 4,000 on my website, and there are none on any others. You can figure out, you can reverse engineer a product, you can figure out where you think it came from, you can read that little label, see how much the shipping really matters. And lo and behold, small businesses and users all over the world started to use this, because what was missing was a platform for this kind of information. People think it's proprietary information, but it's not true. There just was never, nobody had ever made a place where you were going to find out this kind of stuff. And you can make it into a very, very convenient marketing tool. So if somebody is proud to show where things come from, they can make a map on our site. Just like YouTube, they can embed it on their blog or on their online store, and anybody who wants to know more about that product can click through and find out in great detail everything about it. And just to give you an idea of the kinds of things that I started seeing pop up every morning, people from places far north shipping fruit from places far south, trying to get over the carbon footprint that was involved when they knew it had to be flown there. People from, regional places, basically able to make food that was culturally significant and locally produced. This is a corn flour staple in Venezuela that even went so far as to map where the oil that cooked the corn was from, which was also Venezuela. So big maps, small maps, maps of travel. This is actually a map of a trip that was avoided. Maps of cars. I showed this in Seoul like 6 months ago, but they didn't know that Korean cars were being made in Slovakia. And I'll bet you didn't either, but now you do. That's what's happening every day. There's actually a whole class of students showing how many things are being made in Eastern Europe. It's really amazing because you start to see a map of the world's resources, where things are made and where things are purchased. This is an IKEA bed that's mapped in great detail with a really accurate footprint, but it wasn't made by IKEA. The map was made by a researcher. And if you Google for IKEA footprint, this is what you'll find because it's the best information available. I'd love to have IKEA publish information too, and they're welcome to. This is symbiotic, right? There's a stigma about knowing where things come from, but actually it's beneficial. This is a builder of a house in California who goes down to the detail of the supplier and the footprint of shipping the door lock to the building site, and includes information about the supplier's phone number and website and how to get in touch. So if you Google for a door lock from Idaho, you'll find this one. And if you Google for a sustainable house, you'll find this. So there's a sort of a mutual gain in being transparent and posting these kinds of relationships on the web. And that's exactly what has built up this site. That's what's given me great hope and led me to quit my academic job and start this company. This just makes me laugh, but it's very serious. It took me a while to figure this out. When you put a platform on the web and people start putting stuff in it and it's never been done before, you really don't know what you're up against. What I gathered after a while was actually a bomb. It's made in Texas. It's a bomb made to perforate, I had to look this up, oil wells. So you dig a hole in the ground and you put a bomb there, and then all the oil flushes in. And it has a really high footprint, 46 tons, and I don't know if that includes, blowing it up. And the cool part is that, just so you understand the interconnectedness of all of us and all of these things, these materials, EFI, NONA, are explosives. And they've been now folded into our database. So if you're trying to source locally for explosives, you can go to SourceMap. Really, the first reason that I had any reason, the first faith in this project was this chef from Cambridge who said, hey, I source locally, and all my competitors say that they do, and I know that they don't. So I'm going to make a map that shows exactly what I source locally, and I'm going to show exactly what I don't source locally. So you get a 100% picture. And 95% by weight, sourced locally during the summer. So it's very technical stuff, but it matters. And not only that, but then I'll post the farm names, and people, in the menu, they'll have a printout of the map, and they'll be able to visit the farms if they like the food. It'll be good for the farmers, it'll be good for the restaurant, it'll be bad for the competition. More recently, and this is getting more poetic, people are finding better ways to use the website. A fashion designer who sells at Barney's in New York, sort of high-end fashion, with a remarkably small supply chain for clothing, because he actually manages to get the wool from a farm in upstate New York and have it worked in Massachusetts, and actually the garment sewn in Queens and then delivered to Manhattan. So it's amazing, knowing a little bit now as I do, that anything can be made like this. And then so he puts the video in there, and you see this little sort of black and white code. I don't know if these are popular yet. They've just started to pick up in the States. These are things you scan with your iPhone. And the idea, and in fact the practice is, the person in the store can scan the code and see the sheep that the wool came from, that the clothing is made of. And you know what? That's perfectly normal, and it's free, and everyone should expect to know at least that much about everything that we buy. But not only that, of course, it's good for marketing. So it gets embedded into the websites, it gets embedded into the newspapers, it becomes viral. And that's one of the things that we want the most, is to highlight the efforts of people who are transparent and to make it pay. This is one of the more substantial things that I think we've been able to be a part of, working with the Highlands and Islands Enterprise in northern Scotland, who was actually one of the early funders of the project. And they're dealing with an area that has a lot of small businesses, small craft producers, and vast inefficiencies from having to negotiate this terrain. I don't know if any of you have been there, but it takes a while to drive around. And this is a study that we did of all the breweries in the Highlands of Scotland. And as part of that study, we found that they all had 1 weak link. They all had to send their beer to bottle in England, quite far away. That's the map on the left. So it's a total distance of 9,000 kilometers one way. So every day you see these trucks going down the Highlands, getting the beer bottle, driving back up to the Highlands, and then probably shipping it back to England for retail. And you think, well, that's bad for one business. It's really bad for an entire industry. And it makes quite an easy case, not for carbon footprint alone, but for jobs, for competitiveness, to first of all, to share this data. Right? Nobody does this. Share, find out what's going on, where are things really coming from, and where are they really going to, and then optimize. And in this case, because in part working with the Highlands and Islands Enterprise, a government body, to be able to invest, to give loans, to make a bottling plant in the north, to reduce the shipping distance by 60%. And increase the amount of time the trucks were free. So this is the kind of stuff that you can start to imagine doing once we have more correct information about where things come from. And to show that it's not just small business. Recently, and this is the only study I can talk about with big companies, but we started working with big companies who want to highlight the importance of buying certain kinds of products. This is the supply chain of recycled paper in the United States of America. It's a supply chain that starts in these sort of yellow dots in the Midwest, where waste paper is collected in these 6 large cities, transported up to Michigan and then Wisconsin to be turned into paper, and then distributed all over the country. And it's a map that is meant to illustrate the carbon footprint savings. Actually, the shipping accounts for 2% of the whole thing, believe it or not. It's also meant to give a sort of an immediate benefit to recycled paper by showing where it comes from. And imagine the poetry. I mean, our system does this for free. It'll track down where you called in from, and it'll trace that piece of paper you're holding in your hand to where it was thrown away by someone else. It's poetic. Right? It's not just about carbon footprint. This is poetry. This is the story of artifacts that have traveled through generations, so that when you're holding it, you have the sort of dashed dreams of some poet in Milwaukee, or some laundry list from Chicago in your hand. It's a powerful thing, I think. And to think that we have this kind of insight into mundane commodities, it really decommodifies them. And it really it opens up the room to insert greater value. Where does this one end up? Milwaukee. Yeah. And that's where we're headed now with this project. I'm just wrapping up. It's really connecting the most extreme sides of the supply chains, the consumers and the producers, making the same kind of technology that I showed you for the Office Depot, making it for the internal Indian cotton market. There's no reason you shouldn't expect to see an interview of the farmer who sowed the farmer who made the cotton that is in the clothing that you're buying, and that you have access to that information online and on your iPhone at any point. And that goes both ways. There's no reason that the farmer shouldn't have access. There's 4 billion people out there who don't have the internet, but they have cell phones. And that means they have access to a much simpler but very powerful version of the web. There's no reason they shouldn't know what the price of cotton is at market, that they shouldn't have receipts for their trades, that they shouldn't expect to be part of this. This is a bilateral arrangement. And so we're working on both ends of that right now. And this is exactly the dream that I have. It's a dream where you actually get to know what you're buying and where it comes from, and what it's made of, and what its impact is on the world, environmentally, socially. This is not the future. This is a giant touchscreen in my office that we've devised to let corporate types sort of sketch out supply chains and immediately at a glance find out where certain things are available, what the costs are of moving them around the world in terms of time and money, but also carbon, and to allow them to start tweaking a little bit, because never before has there been access to information about where things are truly available. It always goes through middlemen, it always goes through complicated trade routes. Why aren't we all putting out what we make on these maps of the world so that they can be found? And then why aren't we all trying to optimize as designers, as purchasers of things? We all have a say in what goes on in the world. We're not always the ones drawing the supply chains, but when you go grocery shopping, you certainly are putting together quite an extensive supply chain just in your bag that you're carrying with you. And shouldn't you be able to know whether buying that one product from that one country versus another will increase the quality of life for somebody or decrease the carbon footprint of the product? We have the right to that information. We deserve that information, and that's what I'm here to do. I'm going to close with something that's a little bit less happy. A student of mine in the first year that I taught, Alex Rosenberg, the glassblower, he made this video. It's a little jarring. He juxtaposes pictures of glass machines in China stamping out goblets that are sold at a store called Crate & Barrel in the US, and the video of himself making an exact replica of the same goblets, of one at a time, in the glass-blowing shop at MIT. Actually, he sped up the video of himself, but he didn't speed up the video of the factory. It's a poignant. I mean, this was really powerful stuff to see, juxtaposed. So you have these two modes of production, these two completely different worlds. Like every problem that I uncover, I think it hides a solution. But basically, the story of this installation piece was that he replicates a line of glasses from Crate & Barrel and goes and sits outside of Crate & Barrel, lays out a blanket, puts the glasses there, charges the same price as you pay inside. Yeah. It doesn't end well, which is even sadder. But, I think this goes back to that sneaker at the very beginning, which is I think we can, I believe, obviously you've seen my work, I believe that we can connect people, make them expect to know much more about where things come from, who made them, what conditions they were made in. Maybe his outfit, didn't help. He even had the catalog there so you could price match, guarantee. Fantastic. But, we need to bring that coolness there. We need 18, 19-year-olds who are about to go into product design taking pictures of craft objects. We need to make it cool. We need to make it trendy. We need to make it designer. And I think there's a lot of hope there, because if we brand craft, just last night I learned about the Imagine Design Made thumbprint that's part of this group's work here. And I think that that's exactly the kind of sensibility that we need to have consumers and designers be a part of, and to really raise the value of craft, make it something extremely, extremely desirable for everyone.